Welcome to the Liberty Dad podcast, where we prepare for tomorrow's political conversation by how we engage today. This episode, I chat with Eric Parker, who is running for the City Council District 2 seat here in Jacksonville. The idea for this interview comes from a previous interview by Melissa Ross of WJCT News. About 2 weeks ago, she interviewed LeAnna Cumber, Republican mayoral candidate for Duval County. We thought it would be interesting to give Eric an opportunity to answer many of the same questions as if he had been asked. If you didn't hear the original episode, don't worry, I will put the link in the show notes. Now, some of the questions are very specific to LeAnna, so I'll be rephrasing them so that they make sense. And along the way, I may ask some of my own questions, and if we see anything interesting in the viewer questions, then I'll pop those and ask Eric as well. So for now, let's dive in and talk to Eric. Eric, good day. How are you, man?
Good. How are you?
Very well. And I am glad that you decided to be here, here at Liberty Dad Podcast here in Jacksonville. And you are running for Jacksonville City Council. So let's dive right in. Why are you running for Jacksonville City Council?
So I decided to run for Jacksonville City Council. It really started back before COVID. I turned my passion for craft beer into a side gig, part-time jobs with a few different craft beer industries here in Jacksonville.
Mm-hmm.
One of them was a brewery tour business. Another one was a local craft brewery. And whenever the COVID lockdowns happened, first the state locked down small businesses, and then whenever enforced those same small businesses, the brewery specifically, to become a restaurant just so that they could reopen.
Okay.
And then once they were allowed to reopen, shortly after that, City Council passed an ordinance fining small businesses $500 they had 50 more people on the property.
Okay.
So this ultimately led to me start going to City Council meetings, speaking up on what I'm seeing there, and I was seeing a lot of corporate welfare and a lot of them handing out handouts to their well-connected buddies. And it kind of, at the same time, I left the Republican Party for the Libertarian Party, and I decided, you know what? The establishment and the two-party system, all of them are guilty of handing out money while trying to hurt small businesses in Jacksonville. So that's what motivated me to run for city council, to put an end to the cronyism, into the corporate welfare, cut spending and cut taxes.
Okay, awesome. So let's just dive right into the idea of you being on city council. And you've been pretty critical here. You know, you're talking about special interests and you're talking about buddies and all this stuff. So tell me what you would do different than some of the current ones. You don't have to name them necessarily. I don't think it's always good. I think it's poor form to necessarily name somebody unless we absolutely have to. So tell me what you would do differently if you were on city council.
So ultimately, because I'm running as a third party candidate, I'm not beholden to one of the two major parties.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have to give those lobbyists and those companies that help fund their political campaigns any money. And you might think, oh, well, that's some type of conspiracy. But you can go down and sit and watch a city council meeting, and you'll see that they're giving it out sometimes to themselves, sometimes to businesses they used to work for, sometimes nonprofits that they chair right now. They're giving our taxpayer dollars to each other. So that's one thing I'm going to do different, is I'm not going to give our taxpayer money to any businesses in Jacksonville.
Okay. So let me ask you then, if you're not going to give them any money, these businesses, these organizations are currently already in existence and they're providing some level of service here in Jacksonville. So what happens to them if you come back and say, you know, no, whatever money you were getting, I'm not giving you, or I'm not giving you any more, then we come into a problem, right? So how do we resolve that?
The free market.
Okay.
But it also depends on like what you're talking about, what services they're currently providing, because a lot of them, they were in default. A lot of those nonprofits, and I don't want to call them out by name, but if you have a homeless nonprofit and you fix the issue of homelessness, then your nonprofit goes out of business. So a lot of the nonprofits that focus on certain issues, they're not really trying to fix the issue. They're just essentially they're collecting our money, and they're not fixing the issues. Nonprofits, businesses, I don't think a private business needs to be bailed out with a form of corporate welfare to keep them afloat. They should run a better business if they want to stay in business.
Okay.
Now, do you have a specific service that a business
No, I
provides?
Just, it was just, hey, when you're talking about, I'm not going to give these businesses money.
Yeah.
These aren't new businesses.
Yeah,
right?
no.
It'd be one thing if it was a new business, right? Like, hey, you know what? Go figure it out on your own. Go raise your own money. But if a business is already in existence or some sort of organization, they're providing some sort of service of some kind.
Yeah.
Whether or not they're profitable may be a different matter. And so what you're saying is, hey, if you're not profitable, that's your problem. And effectively, the brutal libertarian position is kind of the market will swallow you up.
Yeah, the taxpayers should be done bailing these people out, and the market will provide, competition will provide their replacement.
Okay, fair enough. So one of the questions, this particular question did lead into talking about the internet cafes.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that, and we're not going to get into too much, talking about what LeAnna Cumber did and didn't do and all that. But, I was curious, would you have shut down or worked to shut down the internet cafes?
No, not at all. I mean,
why?
Because I don't see, first off, they didn't shut down Best Bet. They're doing the same thing there. People are still gambling, but that's because lobbyists for Best Bet, not that I would have shut down Best Bet either, but the lobbyists have more money for Best Bet, so they were able to protect them and their interests. I just think that, they didn't shut down the Florida lottery, which is run by the government. You could still go spend your money gambling in other ways right now if you want. You could still gamble online. You know what I mean? So I would not have shut down the internet cafes. Not at all.
Okay. So you wouldn't shut them down, and you're not going to give money to any of the various businesses and organizations. So one of the things that recently happened, we had the gas tax.
Mm-hmm.
We had the increase. For anybody that's watching that's not familiar with the gas tax, what happened? We had a 6-cent gas tax that was passed, or there was legislation that was passed that increased by 6 cents for 30 years. And then I think there was simultaneous passage of an extension of the current 6 cents for an additional 10 years, if I got that correct. So it sounds like you would not have voted for that.
I would have voted no on the gas tax increase, and I would work to cut the current or the previous gas tax of 6 cents as well.
Okay. So the reason for the gas tax, of course, was for infrastructure.
Yeah.
And they had like all these huge plans, and they had maps, and I mean, it looked like it was pretty well laid out. So how do we make improvement in Jacksonville without that revenue? Because the revenue has to come from somewhere. So where's it going to come so that we have this infrastructure that people are looking for? Because they weren't just taking money just to be taking it. Well, at least that's not what they said, right?
So let's start with the gas tax increase first off.
Okay.
40% of that went to construction of the Emerald Trail, which is a really pretty trail that's going to run from downtown out and connect with the Baldwin Rail Trail out on the west side of Jacksonville. All well and good, great idea, but is that where 40% of the gas tax of all of Jacksonville needs to be going? Okay. To a certain trail that only will go through 3 or 4 different districts in Jacksonville, whenever you have 14 districts in Jacksonville, all spread out. So you want to make the people that live in other areas of Jacksonville, you want to make them pay for or all of the Emerald Trail. A certain portion also went to the Skyway, which was an issue, and we'll get into that one later. But that was part of that 40% or even more as well, and it costs like $500 million in taxpayer money to keep that afloat. And it doesn't benefit the people where I live, District 2 and Ocean Way and East Arlington. The rail trail, or excuse me, the Greenway or the Skyway, they're not running out to Ocean Way and East Arlington. So ultimately, I'll be elected by the people in District 2 and Ocean Way. And I don't think that they really want to see their tax dollars leave District 2 and go to developing downtown.
Okay, that's fair.
But so now let's go to the 6 cent on the rest of the road construction. Where I live in District 2, there's Alta Drive, and it's 8 years behind schedule because they took the money that was supposed to be allotted for its construction and widening project. It was supposed to happen 8 years ago. They took that money and spent it elsewhere in Jacksonville. So that 6 cent gas tax, they're already not spending it where they're supposed to be.
Okay.
The initial 6 cent.
Okay.
And then it's lining the pockets of the corporations that get these big projects for the other, at least 40% of the new 6 cent increase.
Okay. And this is the point in the interview where it was asked of LeAnna Cumber if she was indicting basically decades of leadership. And are you basically doing the same thing, indicting decades of leadership?
Yes, but I'm not going to tiptoe around it. I think
Okay.
both parties, Republican and Democrat, are responsible for the out of control spending and the waste of our taxpayer dollars. So, and that's why you have 3 libertarians running for city council, because we're tired of it, because each one of them are beholden to their political party and they're really only concerned with maintaining control and the status quo.
Okay. So they're not doing anything good.
I'm not going to say, I mean, I don't know. I think that what they are doing could be done better.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. And you once upon a time were a Republican.
I was, yes.
Okay. And you switched explicitly because of your experience at the brewery, correct?
Yeah, well, and a little bit more than that, just the politics, as we got so far away from that constitutional Republican, that Tea Partier, if you will, the fiscally conservative Republican, those no longer exist. I mean, I think I registered as a Republican when I got my driver's license or turned 18. Maybe it was whenever I joined the Army. And that was because I'd heard of a guy named Ron Paul. So
Okay.
that is why I became a Republican. And I stayed a Republican for so long because of Rand Paul running in 2016. But I could see from there moving forward up till 2020 that there's no one really left in the Republican Party that is willing to stand on people within their party's necks and hold them accountable.
Okay. And you plan on doing that?
I do.
Okay.
I did it for 6 months straight, going to every city council meeting. I mean, granted,
Right.
I was a registered libertarian, but I called them all out, regardless of party, regardless of district. And I said, look, I named the businesses that were getting the $1 million bailouts, all the developers, all the NFL owners of the NFL teams. I called them out and said, look, this is not how we're supposed to be spending our tax dollars.
Right. So if you're going to be calling them out, then I assume that you'll be willing to be called out.
Yeah.
Okay. And who do you, will you be, even though you're with the Libertarian Party, if the Democrats, somebody from the Democrat Party, somebody the Republican Party, if they call you out, what happens?
I mean, what are they calling me out on?
I just in general.
Inconsistencies, being
Sure.
too honest,
Sure.
too genuine. I mean, I'm going to tell them, like, look, we're seeing the results of y'all tiptoeing around right now. We got record-setting inflation, out of control spending, and they continue to spend money like it's going out of style, and no one is calling them out. I don't know that Democrats have ever called each other out for spending. They've never been concerned with that, I don't think. But there was a time whenever Republicans said, hey, is this what we should be spending money on? And that's no longer the case.
Okay. Fair enough. Let's move along and let's talk about safety in Jacksonville. Every now and then I hear a story on the news and it's, some gang here, something going on, a shooting. We've even had a couple of shootings that hit national media in the past. And it doesn't seem to me that Jacksonville has necessarily gotten any safer since then. So as a libertarian candidate, what are you going to do to help increase the safety of the city? Because one of the things that we're talking about, it's in the conversation, is we want to bring people in. That's part of our conversation. And certainly it becomes more difficult when there's a perception that, hey, this is a very dangerous city. So how do we fix that? What do we do? Because remember, we're not taking tax money.
That's right.
So how are we going to protect people? Because it sounds like you're looking to climb Mount Everest here.
So ultimately, I think you have to look at really what is the cause of the violence in Jacksonville. I mean, I don't have a background in criminal justice. I was a military police officer for 9 years in the Army Reserves, but ultimately you don't deal with a lot of gang violence within the military. There's onesie-twosies. But I think, and not all of the violence is gang violence. Some of it is, road rage or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
But I think the reason why there is so much gang violence is because the gangs have more power. And the reason why I think they have so much power is because of the like why these certain things are happening in certain communities. Others, you could tell they're still kind of the establishment police officer, I guess. You know what I mean?
Right.
Your typical law enforcement officer. So, but I mean, it takes that type of engagement, us engaging with, like, I know as much as people want to rag on the police, they're going to be there until we find a better alternative. And we
Okay.
haven't found that yet, right? So
Right.
we got to work with what we got.
Yep. Folks, real quickly, I just wanted to point out, I just realized that I hit the mute button by accident for a few moments ago. So just to catch you back up real quick, just in case you were like, hey, I didn't hear part of that answer. What I was asking him was about how we, how we make Jacksonville safer. And his answer was effectively, hey, we need to start getting involved at a community level, and we need to start working with the sheriff's office, and we need to start doing things that don't necessarily require looking for drugs, looking for what many in the Libertarian Party believe to be victimless crimes. And so, and again, we can have a conversation more fully on the views of drugs at a later point. And then I was kind of asking. He pointed out that he's spoke with 4 out of 6 sheriffs. So I wanted to know what their feeling was, and he said there's a mix of the feeling. There's just some of them are kind of on board with it. Some of them are a little bit more, policing like. So, and he's got 2 more to visit and talk to. And then once he talks to all 6 candidates for sheriff's office in 2023. Then he's going to officially come out and make a recommendation. So just in case the audio cut out for you guys, I apologize. That's my fault. I was doing too many things here. So we'll go ahead and we'll move on. So you've got a plan. You've got some ideas on how you're going to make Jacksonville a safer place.
Well, and something else to add before we move on. I think a lot of where their most dangerous parts of Jacksonville are, people usually say the northwest side of Jacksonville. I would like to see some firearms training, basic firearms training, meaning firearms safety classes. And it doesn't have to be ran by a government organization. It could be a nonprofit. It could be like a Maj Touré's organization. I'd love to see them come out to Jacksonville and maybe we host an event and get people involved, because one, if you have a armed society as a polite society, and if they're legally carrying firearms, because we currently still don't have constitutional carry in the state of Florida. So they're going to have to go through the right hurdles to make sure that they're not illegally carrying so that the cops can't harass them for something else. Then once they are safe and still carrying, they can defend themselves against violent crime, because that is something where police come in handy is stopping violent crime. But I want to see people safely carrying their firearms.
Okay.
And I think that there's a large portion of our community in Jacksonville that is firearms illiterate. So I want to maybe figure out a way to help them learn more about firearms and learn to trust them and know how to use them safely and appropriately.
Since we're talking about crime, what's your feel on the idea of saying, in addition to addressing crime in this, maybe call it a non-standard way, because we're going to kind of get away from this policing-driven model, and we're going to go to a slightly different model, one that we don't necessarily see implemented in other places. And then at the same time say, you know what, I want to increase, I would like to see an increase in gun ownership. What's your feel for the residents of Jacksonville? Do you think they're going to be receptive to that message? Because it almost kind of sounds like we're going to stop doing this thing that people believe protects them.
Yeah.
And by the way, we're going to encourage people to get more guns.
So where I live in District 2, there's probably a firearm behind every door. You know what I mean? Okay. It's more rural, but it is getting a little more diverse. But I think that's why there's a negative stigma on firearms in the urban community. But that's because they've been abandoned by the firearms community. Instead of getting more involved where they should, they've kind of forgotten about them, if you will. You know what I mean? But also other areas of law enforcement, like we could go to the community policing aspect of it, where some nonviolent crimes are, more of a civil citation than a court date and a day in jail or whatever. You know what I mean? Because then people lose their employment. You know what I mean? And then they end up resorting to more crime, sometimes to feed their family if they lose their job. So there's no excuse for theft and stealing and taking advantage of other people's private property.
Okay.
But I do think that if we can better inform all of Jacksonville about their rights, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, I think that that'd be a good step in the right direction.
Okay, let's take an audience member question, and this question comes from D. We'll just leave it at that. And so the question is, how would you have voted in this recent vote on term limits here in Duval?
I would have voted in favor of term limits
Okay.
at the local level in Duval. And what we currently have is like loose term limits. Basically, you serve 2 terms in city council, you have to take a term off from that seat, but you can run for something else in the next term, and then you can come back after 1 term of sitting out. I'm pretty sure that's the way it works. So I am going to use some names of current council members and other elected officials in Jacksonville, but Matt Carlucci, he bragged to me about how he's been in city council for 18 years or so, but it's just a side gig for him. But
Okay.
I think it's a side gig for him because he enjoys the benefits of being an elected official, meaning hobnobbing with the investors of downtown and whatnot. So,
Okay.
and then other people. The other day, Jerry Holland, he's the current property appraiser for Duval County. I snuck into the Republican Tea Party meeting, and he was bragging about how he's been an elected official for like 30 years or something. And
You know we're live, right?
yeah, I know we're live.
Okay, I just want to make sure before
yeah.
you upset the entire city council.
No, I ain't worried. Oh gosh, I'm so concerned about their feelings. But he once again termed it as, I don't think of me being. He said these words because he knows Tea Party Republicans how we feel about supposed to be how we feel about career politicians, or how they felt about career politicians. And he said, but I look at it as doing a civil duty. So I was like, well, yeah, that's a good spin on it, but you also have bounced back and forth between property appraiser and supervisor election, both positions that pay upwards of $150,000 a year salary.
Okay.
That's a pretty nice perk to your civic duty. Anyways.
Okay, fair enough. So you mentioned you mentioned, I better move on before you start name dropping more people. But you mentioned downtown, and so let's talk about some of the downtown incentives. And I guess the biggest question that I have is, give me, this question could go in so many different ways. Give me something interesting that I haven't heard about incentives for downtown. Everybody wants to talk about downtown, and it seems like we can't seem to get a good idea down there. So what the heck is going on down there? Like, what do we do?
So in my opinion, the issue with downtown is there are certain religious organizations that own a lot of the good real estate.
Okay.
And I had heard that they also own a lot of the beer and liquor licenses.
Okay.
And it makes it difficult for a good brew pub, I'm passionate about my craft beer, a good restaurant with local craft beer, or a scratch kitchen or something like that, a good place to eat and enjoy yourself downtown to move in, because certain people own up all the licenses that are required to run a business in Jacksonville.
Okay.
I would like to see a lot of those restrictions loosened, at least at the local level. I know like beer and wine licenses, that's more of a state issue, but if they see that Jacksonville is trying to deregulate, maybe they'll follow suit. I think that's one issue. Another issue is and people brag about the Rev grants and they assumed I didn't understood what they meant one time. But essentially that is hand selecting a business and giving them a 75% property tax over the course of 20 years or so. And then after that, they'll start paying the full-on property taxes. And while, us as libertarians, we love cutting taxes, but we want to see them cut for everyone, not just hand-selected, not choosing the winners and losers. So that's a lot of what's happening in downtown, is they have these outside investors and developers that they're willing to give them a property tax cut, but you got the people that have been living in Jacksonville, where 51% of our property taxes are by single-family homes and townhomes and condos. That's where most of our property taxes come from, not the business, not industrial property or commercial property. It's mostly residential. So I think that's the issue, is that Downtown Investment Authority focuses on helping out to attract investors. And don't get me wrong, deregulating and cutting taxes is a great way to attract good companies to move in and develop. But you got to offer those to the people that have been here this whole time,
Right.
holding you down. So
Okay. Tell me about how the DIA plays a role,
so
and tell me their relationship with the developers.
So I think, in my opinion, their role, they just funnel money to the well-connected people in Jacksonville.
It's quite a claim.
Yeah, it's pretty accurate too.
Okay.
And you can look it up whenever you look at any of the city ordinances that has the DIA involved. You know what I mean? It's I don't even know. I guess I should look more into this before I make these claims, but a lot of these deals are made behind closed doors whenever they're working with our taxpayer dollars.
Okay.
So, and then, yeah, I think that it's the responsibility of a developer to, make wise purchases and do better management of their own businesses. Don't be looking for the taxpayer to bail them out whenever they purchase a property and can't finish the job.
Are there other incentives that you would be willing to support as a member on city council for developers? If a developer comes and says, I got this really great idea, maybe it's, a whole block, maybe it's just a few buildings, whatever the case may be. Where would you draw the line and say, okay, well, I don't say draw the line, but where would you say, I'm willing to accept this?
So I think that there are ways where DIA can help, city council can help. And number one, that's deregulating the permitting process and the regulations that people have to jump through to develop or redevelop parts of downtown. But you're not gonna get a yes vote from me to give a well-connected developer some billionaire, millionaire taxpayer dollars from the people of Jacksonville. I'm gonna be a no vote on that.
Okay. All right, folks. So I want to just take a moment here real quick. I want to take a little bit of just a pause, just an operational pause. So I'm going to go ahead and just put up a screen. I don't have any, great exciting music, so I apologize for that. But give us about 2 to 3 minutes. I need to, we need to take a little bit of a break here, and then we will be right back. So see you in just a few minutes. All right, folks, we are back. I am glad that you were willing to wait just a few minutes. Had to take care of something very, very quickly. And now that it's taken care of, so we can finish with this interview. So let's continue on. Let's talk about the city's arts and entertainment, because the running theme through this is that you're not going to vote for any tax money, right? And so we got to figure out how these things are going to happen, because you just can't have a city without entertainment and art. Like those, like nobody wants to move to a city that doesn't have any, right? And we already have some, so we want to make sure that we sustain what we have as well. So tell me about how you're going to support the city's arts and entertainment, maybe even grow it.
So, with the free market,
Okay.
I support art in public places, for the record. And what that meant in the original question that was asked is Jacksonville city government has this thing where they do murals on the side of buildings.
Mm-hmm.
And I think ultimately that's great. As long as you could get the permission of the, and you probably could do that really easy, but get the permission of the owners of the building, even if that's like a government building. Imagine how pretty our jail would be if it had a cool mural on the side. But what I don't necessarily want to see is taxpayer funding going towards funding that. But currently, right now, you can go to almost any local craft brewery and there's probably a local artist's paintings on the wall.
Okay.
And it didn't take the government to step in and tell the breweries that they need to put local artist stuff up on the wall. They chose to do that on their own. One that I know of in particular does a weekly showcase, and every week a new artist comes in and they put their paintings or whatever type of art it is all up over the tap room of the brewery, and then the next week a new artist comes in. So that is all done without the hand of the government and without taxpayer funding. And ultimately, I think that's the best way to do it. Same thing like the music scene lately in Jacksonville, we've been doing pretty good getting sporting events in, and concerts. I just went to Joe Rogan and Justin Bieber in the same weekend. You know what I mean? Like,
Okay, we'll forgive you for that. At least
Which one?
The second
I'm just
one.
kidding.
The second one. We're gonna forgive you for that and maybe move on. I don't know.
But I don't know that it requires government. When I say government, I mean taxpayer funding, because the government doesn't create revenue. They take revenue from other people. They take revenue from artists when they sell a painting.
Okay.
So
in order for this to happen, so we've got businesses downtown. You were talking about easing up on where we can with some of the alcohol licensing,
mm-hmm.
and you were talking about you've been talking about the free market and saying, hey, like, look, we can let somebody spray paint a wall for a business, and that's going to bring businesses downtown, right?
That I'm not necessarily saying
what I'm getting, and I'm
that's what
I'm doing this intentionally a
Gotcha.
little bit, being a little bit devil's advocate here.
Yeah.
But remember, one of the things that we've been having trouble with downtown is getting people down there. So we're having trouble with businesses, and then we're also having trouble getting people down there, because there have been a few businesses here and there, and they didn't seem to do very well. So how do we get people downtown? It's like a chicken egg problem, right? People don't want to go downtown because there's nothing to do. Nobody wants to build down there because nobody's going down there. So how do we fix that? How do we get people downtown at least?
So I don't think spending more taxpayer funding downtown is going to make people go downtown. You have to give them a reason to go. And my point with the Justin Bieber, Joe Rogan comment is that was in the same venue 2 days in a row, totally different crowds at both events. It got people downtown, and it didn't necessarily need the government's help to do that. You know what I mean? But people will say, well, that is I think the city owns Veterans Memorial. You know what I mean? Jacksonville's Veterans Memorial. So someone would argue, well, they did build that, but they didn't have to build it. Anyone could have built it. You know what I mean? I'm just saying that the original argument might have been for, well, we need to publicly fund arts and entertainment, and I totally disagree with that. I think it is happening naturally on its own. Okay. But if you could deregulate things to where if you wanted to host an event somewhere that they didn't have to jump through so many hoops to get so many licenses to be able to do so, I think that would help as well.
Okay.
Occupational licensing and stuff like that.
Okay, so you're saying there's some Have you started looking at some of the regulations so that you can bring it to the people and say, all right, look, check this out. This right here, I think we need to get rid of this. And once we do, or maybe not once we do, I mean, nothing, things sometimes happen slowly, but the result of getting rid of this will lead to a little more of this. Have you started looking at some of that regulation?
I have not looked at all the regulations, but I know like street vendors, they have to have a city license. You know what I mean? Like if you want to do a performance act in the green space, the wide open green space downtown, you got to get permits to do so. If you want to host a concert, you got to get permits to do so. But Jacksonville City Council, or not Jacksonville City Council, Jacksonville Entertainment District, you know what I mean? They don't have to jump through those same hoops because they kind of control those hoops to jump through. So that's, I don't know that,
So are you saying no permits?
I kind of am saying no permits. Like what I'm saying is you got to get permission to use the property to host an event. Okay. And if the city owns the property, I get that they got to let you know so that there's not a conflict or a scheduling conflict. Oh, sorry, we already had this group there, but it should be a lot easier to use those spaces. To get those permits.
Okay. So it's just too difficult at this point.
Yeah. Okay. And I wouldn't even say too difficult. It's just more difficult than it needs to be.
Okay. So how are we still getting people downtown? What's the incentive? That's the incentive, just to free things up and then let the cards fall where they may?
Well, I mean, like, you have to give, I think your best bet is to offer that. You gotta, I don't know. I mean, young people are your best target for living downtown, I think. But they don't want to live downtown because they're going to get in their car or an Uber and they're going to go to San Marco or Riverside or the beaches to hang out. Mm-hmm. That's where people are hanging out. They're not hanging out downtown because there's nothing to do downtown unless there's an event. But if they're young professionals, they probably got a lot of student loan debt like me and my wife do. They probably are on a more strict budget than someone who's later in their life and are established in their career. So they're probably not purchasing tickets to every event downtown. That's the only reason why people come down is whenever there's an event going on. I mean, same thing, like a lot of people will say, oh, well, the Jacksonville Jaguars, they're going to bring a lot of business and a lot of people downtown. It's like, well, yeah, for 7, it might be 8 regular home season games. So 8 Sundays out of the year, they'll bring people, but those people aren't staying downtown. They're coming, they're going to come downtown. They're going to enjoy their time and they're going to go home back to those neighborhoods that I mentioned. I mean, that's the thing is like Jacksonville has this more of it's a big city with a small town vibe is the way I like to describe it. You got a bunch of other neighborhoods and they all have their own personality. And I don't know that we should be focusing on downtown per se whenever Jacksonville has so much more to offer outside of downtown where most people go to have fun and enjoy themselves. But natural growth and a little bit of deregulation of the market will allow a good restaurant or brewery or tap room or small business, get some boutiques downtown, maybe deregulate the zoning a little bit so that you could have work and live in the same buildings. I mean, you know what I mean? Like if you could deregulate some of the zoning down there, it might help grow downtown.
Okay. Then so now that we've kind of gotten this idea of like, okay, this is one way where maybe we can increase activity downtown. We still got the problem of people getting there, right? I know that, you know, we could say like Uber and all that, but let's be honest. There are going to be some people that, you know what, taking an Uber is relatively, it's not a big deal financially for them. So they can take the Uber, they can pay the money. Then they can also pay the money to come out and go to whatever event that they want to go to, right? So where does public transportation fit? And you can even throw in the Skyway as well, which I know the Skyway is limited. So, but let's talk about both of those. Like, where do these things fit in for the broader community, and then also for just, you know, downtown or anywhere? I mean, you know, just walk me through this. Where we go? How does that fit?
So, and that's so I'm running in District 2 in Ocean Way and East Arlington, and most people there, they don't care a lick about the Greenway or Emerald Trail or the Skyway. They're not going to use the Skyway when they go to an event. And that's a lot about me and us as libertarians, as individuals. We like our personal space. We like our vehicles, or at least I do. I want to drive my car from Ocean Way, and if I'm going to an event, I plan on parking in a parking garage and walking to an event. Now, the irony of this and all this focus on like public transportation and how great the Skyway is going to be for the people of downtown. my district doesn't have a public bus, much less a skyway or autonomous vehicles driving people around from Ocean Way to their jobs 30 minutes away. And that's where the irony of the gas tax and 40% of it going to something where nobody in my district is going to use or pay for. I've used it once, and that was whenever the One Spark Festival came to Jacksonville. I don't know if you remember that.
Yep.
And they were trying to feature it like it's this big thing, and it was completely empty. Nobody was using it. But we specifically parked at the Prime Osborne, and we got on the Skyway, and it took us over to what's the James Weldon Johnson Park.
Okay.
So, but I've used it one time, and I've lived on the northeast side of Florida 33 years, and I lived in Jacksonville for 8 years, and I've used the Skyway once. So that's my point, is there are 14 districts in Jacksonville, and the Skyway benefits 3 of them. And even with the expansion, it'll only benefit 3 different districts in Jacksonville.
Okay.
But the other 11, the constituents in the other 11 districts are stuck paying for that.
So
now,
you're not gonna expand it?
No, I'm not gonna expand it, but I do think
Would you
that
keep it?
I would keep it only if we can figure out a way to make it best for the taxpayer.
Okay,
And
if we can't, then what?
Well, if we can't, so I'd heard that tearing it down, we would owe the federal government $40 million. But if it costs us $7 million to run it every year, we're going to be at that $40 million eventually. We got to figure out a way to figure that out. Now, what I would like to do, and what was actually proposed back whenever the Super Bowl came to Jacksonville, temporarily, I think Virgin Mobile offered to advertise on the Skyway, and they were going to give the city $800,000 for a couple weeks of having their logos on the Skyway. Maybe we build a program, and I'm stealing this idea from Larry Sharp, but maybe we build a program like that where we find people that want to advertise. Maybe next time the UFC is coming to Jacksonville, we give them the opportunity to give the city $100,000, or maybe we sell the Skyway to a private individual and they fund it and they sell tickets to use the Skyway. I think if maybe Elon Musk, if you're listening to this, maybe we get some.
I'm sure that he is.
Maybe we get some autonomous Teslas running on the Skyway, but you're going to be the one funding it, and you're going to be the one selling tickets to use it.
Okay. Let's talk about education. Did you support the half-cent sales tax?
I did not support the half-cent sales tax.
So you're not going to support the current conversation about increasing, I think it's 1 mil. I think it's 1 mil.
I'll never support a tax increase.
Okay.
How about that?
On anything or?
On anything.
On anything.
I think we're taxed enough right now, and if you give them more money, they're going to find better ways to waste it.
So what about kids that can't read too good?
I think that you could find a mentor at your local nonprofit that can help you. What's that one?
Daniel Kids?
Daniel Kids, Big Brothers, Big Sisters. So
let me push back a little bit.
That can help with that.
Let me push back a little bit. I participated in Daniel Kids,
Mm-hmm.
and they were starving for men.
They were starving children.
Can I
get some water?
Yeah, they were starving for male mentors, because the way that they match up men and young boys, and then women and young girls, and so they don't do cross sex matching.
Yeah.
And they when I went to this, it was like a 2-hour course or something like that, and you sat down and they basically go through all this information and say, these are some of the things that you should be doing as a mentor, some of the things you should not be doing, so on and so forth, right? So it's just kind of give you an idea of how you should be engaging with this youth. And they told me, they were like, we don't get very many men, and then sometimes they come in and they fizzle out.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I'm just going to push back and be a little tough. I don't think that works.
Well, I agree with you in a sense that it takes more of us, more regular people, to get involved in the community. I'm not as involved as I would like to be with my local church, but
right.
I do volunteer some time there, and they have great groups
right.
that they partner with, nonprofits that they believe in, and I think that everyone should find a good nonprofit that they believe in. That's difficult to do because a lot of people, it's in the news every week where somebody involved with government is getting a government handout for their nonprofit, and then they're being investigated by, the FBI or whatever for waste, fraud, and abuse in the whole nonprofit. So you got to have that gift of discernment. But I think that voluntarism is the answer. If you want to help some, look, I just helped your son read earlier.
Right. No, I understand that. And so I guess what I'm pushing back for is because
no one else is.
Yes, because the other people in the studio here are just being so silent. The challenge that I have is I've already been in this space and I've seen that they're already lacking volunteers.
Yeah.
So we're already having this problem, and then we're saying, hey, I don't want to fund, or I don't want to increase the taxes to fund these particular things. And so what we're going to do is we're falling back on these ideas that we're already struggling with to implement in a way that is meeting the current needs. So we're already not meeting the needs, and if we don't fund things, if we don't tax people, and again, I'm just in case anybody doesn't know me, I am the chair of Libertarian Party here, so I largely agree with him.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
but I want to make sure that you give me some good answers here.
So you're saying my answer wasn't good, and I need to.
Well, what I'm saying is,
hear me
you
out.
told me an answer.
Yeah.
That I know is not necessarily sufficient.
Gotcha. All
so
right.
what I want to hear is a better answer. How are we going to solve this need when we're already having a problem, and we're gonna remove funding for this? You're not going to vote for anything.
I think we're seeing right now what's happening in America is people are abandoning government-run education institutions.
Okay.
And they're asking for, first off, city council, we don't get a lot of say, if any, in public education. I think we can bring up a tax increase as a voters referendum to have it on the ballot, but outside of that, like, we don't vote or make decisions on education budget. But my opinion is that we need the voucher program and school choice, and that would solve a lot of these problems. Anyone that I talk to, and it's a lot of people that are unhappy with their public education and their school choices, I tell them to look into stepupforstudents.org. It's a local nonprofit, and they give scholarships to, and you do have to be under a certain income threshold, but they give scholarships to families that want to have their children taken out of public education and sent to private school. And it's paid for through tax credits, essentially. So it is still paid for with taxes. It's just the scholarship is paid for from people donating to the nonprofit to get tax write-offs. So in a sense, taxes are still paying for it, but parents are able to use that money to choose the school that best fits their child and or a student. And that's my thing is, not all schools are the same, and not all students or children are the same either. So we can't have a cookie cutter curriculum for every student and expect them to get the best outcome. Okay,
fair enough. We're winding down on some of the questions here that we have, and so I got two more questions. One of them, I'll ask it just because it wasn't an interview. We are kind of replicating, again, if you're just tuning in, we have kind of emulated to a degree a previous interview that Melissa Ross, who is from WJCT. I knew I was going to mess it up. WJTC. And so she interviewed LeAnna Cumber, who is running for mayor here in Jacksonville. And we thought, hey, you know what? Why don't we introduce some of those same questions to you as well? Just to kind of have a little bit of fun and just see where it goes. So here is the question. It's a little silly in my mind, but hey, we'll go with it. Who won the 2020 election, the presidential election?
So I do believe that the current president right now is Joe Biden.
Okay.
But I don't know that Trump would have been any better. Well, he probably would have been a little better.
Okay.
But he wouldn't have been up to my standards.
Okay.
And that's the issue is now if your question is about whether or not there was any voter fraud, I believe in every election there's a certain percentage of voter fraud. I don't necessarily think there might have been enough that would have won or lost the election. I don't know if it was that close. But the major issue, sorry, I'm looking at my notes here, is the Commission on Presidential Debates not allowing third-party candidates in the debates. So in my opinion, the election has always been rigged. It's been rigged against the non-establishment politicians.
Okay.
So, and until they're allowed to get on the debate stage, I'll continue to say that every election is rigged.
I think the Republican Party just recently mentioned that they were going to pull out of the... so if they're rigging it, why are they pulling out of something that they're heavily involved in ensuring that they are only... How are they... I'm trying to phrase my question here. Why are they pulling out, or why do you suspect that they're pulling out of this thing that they supposedly have a hand in creating and maintaining?
So the Commission on Presidential Debates, it's a nonprofit that was created by and for the Democrat and Republican parties in the United States to essentially mobilize and manage and control the debates. Now, I think that they're saying they're pulling out of that because it was a bipartisan thing, and the Republicans are probably planning on creating their own echo chamber, if you will, to not have the Democrats push back as much. That's my opinion. I don't know that. That's my conspiracy theory.
Okay.
But I think, Joe Jorgensen, someone shared about what you were talking about today, the post today, and it mentioned that there's another, like the American Debate group or something like that. You can look it up. I might be able to find the link, and I'll put it in the comments of this later.
Sure. Or
share her post, but essentially saying, like, here's a nonpartisan, like this current way that debates were managed was bipartisan. It was still a partisan. It was just bipartisan.
Right.
So it wouldn't let third-party candidates in. But if there's another option that's nonpartisan and it gets, at least, that's another issue, is they tried to say, oh, well, you had to get 5% on the polls, but then they wouldn't include libertarian candidates on the polls. So you can't get a percentage on the polls if you're never given as an option for people to choose when you're polling them.
Okay.
So.
All right. So you think he won the election fairly and squarely,
and he's
enough.
and he's doing a terrible job.
Okay, fair enough. Last question. We're going to end with this one. This one's an interesting one. Would you get rid of the Confederate monuments here in Jacksonville?
I would not author a bill to spend any taxpayer money on getting rid of Confederate monuments.
Okay.
But I do think that there's a way to first actually have a conversation with the community. Don't listen to the loudest political organization on the front steps of City Hall with a bullhorn and the people that are just looking for excuses to stay relevant. Now, originally the only reason the Confederate statues got brought up is because Lenny Curry promised it, and he hasn't delivered on his promise.
Should he?
I don't know that he should spend taxpayer dollars on it, but I don't think he should have made a promise if he wasn't willing to complete it. What I'm getting at is that there is a way that you could ask that organization that cares so much about the statues being taken down, work with the people in the actual community, ask those people if they actually want to see them taken down, and then crowdfund and fundraise the money to pay for its removal. And then you could auction the statue off to the highest bidder. It might be a Confederate or Civil War museum. It might be somebody that just doesn't want to see it destroyed. It might be someone from this organization that wants to destroy it themselves, wants to have I don't know what it's made out of, but melt it down and turn it into little tiny statues. But they could fundraise. They could probably sell a bunch of Che Guevara t-shirts and fundraise it themselves. You know what I mean?
Okay, so we're going to sell some Che Guevara t-shirts here in Jacksonville so that we can pay for the removal of the Confederate statues or the Confederate monuments. Do you think that the Confederate monuments are contributing to trouble getting businesses to come to Jacksonville?
I don't think that they are. And the reason why I say that is because look at all of the businesses leaving California and going to Texas. Texas, I don't know if they have more Confederate statues than we do, but I guess it's probably the same. I bet they got more rednecks than we do. How about that? So.
Okay.
And I'm a redneck, so I can say
okay. Okay, so he can say that because he's a redneck and he would fit in perfectly well. So you're not gonna you would be unwilling to use taxpayer money to remove them, but you have no problem with removing them.
Well, and
so let me ask
I
you,
don't want to see.
I want to ask you a personal. Do you think they should be removed?
I personally don't think they should, but I also am not a person of color, and I don't live near any Confederate statues. That's the irony of it. Where I live, we don't have many statues. That's Ocean Way is kind of the rural part of town. That's where you would the opinion of Ocean Way is that that's where all the rednecks live.
Gotcha.
At least that in the west side. So, but yeah, I mean, I don't know that that's where we should be focused. And honestly, I think that issue has done nothing but divide us as a city anyways. Like it definitely hasn't meant that people sat down and broke bread together and had conversations with each other. If anything, they've been yelling at each other about some stuff that doesn't really make a difference in the end of the day.
Okay.
In my opinion.
Okay.
I think there's better ways to focus our energy.
All right. Well, before we close out, you got any final words that you want to tell people?
So my name's Eric Parker. I'm running for Jacksonville City Council District 2. It's in Ocean Way. I don't even... I just want to say I'm the only non-Republican running.
Okay.
I don't know if that needs to be as big of a focus as I just made it, but you can visit my website, ericparkerforjax.com, my Facebook, facebook.com/ericp4jax. Hit the donate tab, help out funding a small grassroots political campaign here to take down the establishment and the status quo.
Okay, awesome. Well, I hope you enjoyed it, folks. And maybe next time that we bring him on, I'll make it even tougher. And, maybe this one will be just the kind of the entry level difficulty, level 1. We'll get to the big boss a little bit later. But for now, that's all for this episode. If you are watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button and connect with me at Liberty Dad on Facebook, Liberty Dad Pod on Twitter, or send me an email to libertydadpodcast@gmail.com because I would absolutely love to hear from you. And I want you to remember, if you are a champion of liberty, your business is people and your product is liberty. Have a great week. Catch you next time. And we are out.
How was that?
Oh, hold on. We're not done yet.
How was that?